Okay, welcome to our seminar. NIS2 is coming, the role of identity management, identity and access management in achieving compliant NIS2 compliance. So welcome, and now I just want to say one thing before we start, and that's please ask your questions in the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. We will try to answer as many as we can at the end of the seminar, but and all the ones that we cannot answer, we will answer in the days after the seminar is done to you personally. Okay, so let's get started with some introductions. So my name is Peter Hellström. I'm head of cybersecurity management consulting at Nixu, which is a DNB company since a year back. I've had over 35 years in information security and management consulting, and 15 years experience with security in the way we're working with it now. So have quite an extensive background. And Kari, please.
Yes, my name is Kari Vierimaa. I'm working in the Identity and Access Management Service area at Nixu as a senior security consultant. And I have over 25 years of experience in IT in general, and then a little over 10 years now, specifically in identity and access management, where I've done a few dozen of these kind of advisory level IAM assignments, and more specifically in a sort of inside IAM, my focus areas are IGA and PAM. So we'll talk about those in a bit. Peter.
Thank you. So the agenda for today is a short introduction to identity and access management, and then we're going to talk a little bit about NIS2 and a little bit of transfer from NIS2 to IAM. And then we're going to talk about IAM's role in becoming NIS2 compliant and have some key takeaways and pitfalls that we also want to discuss at the end of the seminar.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So since we are, of course, very specifically talking about the role of identity and access management for NIS2 compliance, let's just remind ourselves and sort of recap that, well, what exactly is identity and access management? And I've always thought that a nice way to summarize it in one sentence is to say that identity and access management is a framework that ensures the right people have the right level of access at the right time. So it's a framework. So it means that it's not only technology, it also consists of all of the related governance structures, policies, principles, and so on. And then inside the term of IAM, it is split into these three main areas. So on the top left in that circle, you can see IGA, which is Identity Governance and Administration, which covers the related IAM functions for sort of internal workforce identity management. So we are talking about companies and organizations, internal employees, and also in a way internal like external employees, meaning that people who are not on the company payroll but do require access to the internal resources in a very similar way to internal employees. So that's IGA. And then we talk about CM, which can mean both customer and consumer IAM. So instead of talking about internal employees, we are talking about entirely external organizations. So whether they are suppliers, partners, subcontractor organizations, anything like that, or customer organizations as well. And this is where the sort of needs and the requirements for identity and access management are actually quite different to the internal side. This also includes consumer identity and access management. So we are all consumers. So when we go to any kind of online web store nowadays, then that would be covered by consumer IAM. And then the third part is slightly different from the first two, but still included in the under the term of IAM. So PAM, privileged access management. And here we are talking very specifically about credentials, user accounts, and access rights that are significantly higher than the sort of normal end user access rights. So basically we are talking about administrative access rights, and PAM offers some very specific controls for the storage and the management and the use of those privileged credentials. As far as the main capabilities are concerned, we are talking about sort of, first of all, basic lifecycle management, so your normal joiner, mover, leaver processes, and then access right management processes. How do you request access rights? What kind of approval workflows you have, and so on. Access right certifications, meaning regular reviews of access rights, and then the two PAM-specific capabilities, which are credential management, so username, password, vaulting in a secure vault, and also things like password rotation, and then also session management, meaning launching sessions to endpoints and maybe video recording and key logging. So we will come back to these a little bit later on. So in a short summary, what is identity and access management, and what does it contain?
Okay, thank you, Kari. So we're going to back out a little bit and talk about NIS2. Why at all do we have NIS2 to talk about? Well, first of all, EU wants to increase cybersecurity resilience across essential service providers, and this is not only the essential service providers, also whoever delivers things to these service providers. EU also want to streamline the resilience with stricter security requirement and penalties. So new is that companies can be quite heavily fined if they don't live up to the requirements within NIS2, and also top leadership can be punished and taken to court if they are responsible for companies where security is not a priority. And it also wants to improve EU's collective capability to prepare and respond to cyber threats. So one very important thing here is information sharing. NIS2 requires companies to share information about incidents that's happened in their companies, and also the ability to use information that is produced by other companies and other authorities and things like that. So basically, you would say that the main objective is to create a baseline for cybersecurity in Europe. So you can trust that at least the foundations are concerning security, cybersecurity are in place. So then what is NIS2? Well, as I said, stricter cybersecurity requirements. You are required to have proper risk management or risk assessment in your company. And this is really important. Risk assessment, the risk management is the foundation for having proper information security in your company. You need to know what kind of problem to solve before you start solving, and the risk management, the risk assessment is really one of the primary things you should consider there. You need to be able to prevent and detect and respond to incident appropriately. This means you need to have mechanisms in place to know what's going on in your network, in your servers, in your workstations, and everywhere else where digital information flows. You need to set up crisis management, and this is something that companies tend to forget for some reason when it comes to information security. So basically, the question, who do you wake up when something bad happens and you need swift decisions? That's the question you need to be able to answer along a large number of other questions, of course, but for crisis management, it's crucial that you know the chain and how to activate it when something happens. You need to ensure the security of the supply chain. So companies need to ensure that their subcontractors and their suppliers and so on also are secure. We've seen quite a lot of third-party attacks on companies. Swedish Coop is one of them. We've seen it in several other different cases around the world as well. So, and this is a really good rule, but this also means that even if your company is not directly affected by NIS2, you will be indirectly affected because your customers will have requirements or put requirements on you to be secure and have a security baseline. Also ensuring security of the network and information system. So you need to have a good set of controls in place to make sure that whatever you develop or buy also are secure during its lifetime. You need to have policies and procedures in place that assess the effectiveness of cybersecurity risk management practices, and not only the risk management practices, but also other information security practices you have. This basically requires you to have some kind of mechanism similar to an ISMS, a structured way of working with information security. And this is also quite important and will also make life easy for you when changes come to different kinds of information security policies and such. Then they have a little bit of another bird, I think, within here using cryptography and encryption. Well, that's for many is a given, and it's a sort of a detail in the context, but it's still there in the legislation and very clearly stated. So yeah, I brought it along. Please. Okay, so there's a new incident reporting requirements, and it's, as we've seen, a two-stage process. You have 24 hours instead of 72, which was for NIS1. 24 hours means 24 hours, not 3 work days. It means 24 hours, that's 1 day. And to be able to have reporting done and have something intelligent to say, you actually need to collect data continuously, because starting to collect data about what happened when an incident happened, you won't have a chance to finish that in 24 hours. So I predict new services coming up where we collect data and collect information about status and what's happening in your network and everywhere, and do analysis continuously. So you're able to basically press a button and get a report if something bad happens. Then you have a 30-day time limit for a final report, and then you should be aware of what's been happening and made an analysis. What the report formats will look like is something that's subject to local legislation. As you probably all know, this is directive, it's not direct legislation, so each member country in EU will have its own set of laws concerning NIS2. So this is one thing that will be determined in that context. Please. Okay, so I also talked about higher sanctions for NIS2 violations. So basically, what's in the directive is 10 million euros or 2% of the global annual revenue. And this is quite a lot of money for large companies. So it's really important that you are compliant and that you stay compliant, most of all. Leadership for non-compliant organizations can be held personally responsible. And this means actually going to jail in the worst cases, at least very high fines, but also there are jail time in the scale of punishment here. So it's really important also for leadership to understand what's going on and understand the significance of information security in their organization. This is a good catalyst for that, I think. So if we're going to go a little bit from NIS2 to IAM. So first of all, when it comes to NIS2, and the importance of having it is make sure you have a proper cybersecurity strategy in place, because that will tell you what you need to do over the upcoming years, and it should be related to your business strategy. So basically what I'm saying here is if you don't have this, it's a little bit hard to know what to do and to do it in a strict and proper manner. It's always easier to solve a problem that you know you have than solving problems you don't know you have. Another thing that's important here is a well-implemented governance model. That's essential. It will enable you to act in the controlled manner when change occurs. So I know we had NIS, we have NIS2, and I'm quite certain that there will be something called NIS3 as well moving forward. And now companies are preparing a little bit for NIS2, and we see that in an accelerated manner at the moment. But what will happen when NIS3 comes? Will you be as prepared? Will you be prepared to handle that as well? Well, that depends. A proper governance model enables you to make the right decision at the right time, and it also enables you to handle change very much swifter and to very much lower cost than if you don't have a structured way of doing that. And IAM is an important part of becoming and staying NIS2 compliant. It will enhance security for you. It will strengthen your data protection. It will make your compliance auditing much more efficient, since you know what's been going on, who has been accessing what and when, and can get reports from that really quickly. And also, as I said, improve incident response and reporting. So identity and access management is a really important part in getting these reports in to the authorities pretty quickly. And now I'll leave the word to Kari to carry on for the IAM IGA part. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Peter. So in these next 3 slides, we'll go through a couple of these IAM sub areas in a little bit more detail to explain that, well, how does IAM help in getting closer to and reaching NIS2 compliance. So the first slide here is about IGA and CM. So like I explained in the beginning, in these 2 areas, we are really talking about human identities. So we're talking about people accessing services and so on. So on the left side, you can see the NIS2 requirements that we thought are the most relevant in this area. So we are talking about completing a risk assessment, having sufficient security policies in place, ensuring the security of the network and information systems. And then, like Peter was explaining earlier here, ensuring the security of the supply chain, which is actually a really serious and quite a difficult requirement to meet, because external identity management is not easy. So on the right-hand side, then you can see that, well, what can IAM do, or what should you do? So once again, governance, you will be hearing this all the time because it is a critical component. So governance and policies, if you don't know that, then you don't have the correct requirements that you derive from the NIS2 directive, and then you don't know what you should be implementing. So absolutely crucial to get that right. Because only after that you can actually implement the correct IAM processes. How do you handle identity life cycles? How do you make sure that access rights are correctly granted, and even more importantly, how are they correctly removed when they are no longer needed? So this is how you follow the least privilege principle, and this is how IAM can help. Access reviews, of course, incredibly important. So whether that happens on a yearly clock basis, every 6 months or every 12 months, as long as you have those access rights that have been granted to end users in the scope of the IAM solution, then it is a lot easier to set up access reviews and make sure that all unnecessary access rights are removed. And then, of course, auditing and reporting. Who has access to what? Why? When were they granted? By whom? On what basis? So very important IAM capability, of course. In the next slide, we are talking about privileged access management, which is really, really important in the cases of incidents. I mean, obviously in the normal operation as well, in helping to secure and control the use of privileged credentials, administrative access rights. But it really helps in that sort of preventing incidents, detecting them, and mitigating the damage, making sure that there's actually less damage than there otherwise would be. Because after all, by a huge margin, in most malware, ransomware attacks, in most cyber attacks, the attacker wants to gain access to administrative credentials for obvious reasons, because then they would get easy access to all of the applications and data. So PAM is a key component in lowering the risk of that. And then in the case, if something really happens, then PAM will help in reducing the damage. So we are talking about preventing attacks and then reporting them, crisis management, as described in the NIS2 directive. So again, governance, incredibly important. Applying least privilege, credential management, meaning, for example, automated password rotation pretty much kills the slow brute force attack completely. So if someone does gain access into your environment and wants to stay hidden and starts to very slowly scan the environment and look for vulnerabilities, if they start to do brute force attack against administrative accounts, then if PAM automatically rotates those passwords, then slow brute force is pretty much gone, because it takes longer to hack the password than what is the schedule for the password rotation. So really quite an easy way to totally get rid of that attack vector. So important point. Auditing and reporting, of course, both in normal operation and very much in the case of incidents. So for example, you can have video recordings of sessions into endpoints to see that what exactly happened, what did the administrator do, whether that was malicious or totally by accident. Things happen. We are human beings, so we make mistakes. And then finally, in this part of the presentation, next slide, we wanted to mention IoT here because, as we all know, pretty much every single piece of equipment nowadays has a computer in it, or multiple computers, whether that's your fridge at home or your car, or in the case of sort of actual OT environments, of course, there's control systems, and they are more and more online. So especially in the OT part, things used to be very segmented and very separated and in their own kind of like box, but that's no longer the case. External connectivity is needed more and more for maintenance and troubleshooting. So all of a sudden, an attacker could gain access to an OT environment, or even in the consumer world, to equipment in your home. So kind of like all of the same principles apply from an IAM point of view. So again, we are talking about governance and policies and least privilege and auditing and reporting. But the major difference obviously here is that we are not talking about human actors. We are not talking about human identities. We are talking about devices. So device identity management is quite different to human identity management. There's typically a lot less change in the status of a device identity during the lifetime of that device. Typically, when it's first turned on and set up, it sort of calls home and establishes its identity and gets itself set up, and that's pretty much it. But still, obviously, the security policies and processes have to be in place. And then I think we can go to the key success factors and pitfalls, or key takeaways. Yes. So, Peter, I think you've got the first couple of ones.
Yeah, thank you, Kari. Well, as I said before, have a proper cybersecurity strategy in place. This is really important. I always say that it's easy to know what problem to solve before you start solving it, and a cybersecurity strategy can give you that insight, particularly if you relate it to the business strategy and your business target and business goals. And then second one is make sure you have a function in ISMS. The ones I've been part of building is built on ISO 27000, and some of them have been certified, some of them have not been certified. So why you want to have that is because it makes it easier to adapt to new kinds of legislations that are coming, and there's a bunch in the pipe that are coming during the next few years. It's these CRA, CER, NIS2, DORA, a number that affects the car industry, a number that affects the healthcare industry, and so on and so forth. But basically it means that the EU wants you to build a proper cybersecurity in your company to get more business resilience, and that's a really good thing. So those two are the ones that I can communicate. And now, Kari, please take it away.
Yes. Speaking of awareness, it's just really important to communicate the importance of both NIS2 and IAM inside the organization, because that's something that we actually see quite often, that the sort of purpose and the value of IAM is really not understood throughout the organization, or at least in the sort of key stakeholder groups. So it's really important. And then do the non-technical things. So once again, governance, get that right. Set up your governance model for IAM. Make sure that you have an owner, a sponsor, you know, a kind of like a C-level owner or sponsor for IAM, so that there's the mandate and the drive to actually develop it. Get the stakeholder involvement, make sure that you've got your roles and responsibilities correctly set up and functioning. You need to also deploy the governance model. It's no good as a PowerPoint slide. So once you've got that, create the required IAM policies. In this context, you know, derive them from the NIS2 requirements. Obviously, there are many other cybersecurity requirements that you need to take into account, but write the policies and deploy them and follow up. There really are no shortcuts for this part. You cannot get around the fact that you need governance and policies. And then combine IAM with other cybersecurity practices. So obviously it's no good on its own. So make sure that, you know, through the awareness and sponsorship, it is actually understood to be part of the whole set of cybersecurity services and practices in your organization. Pitfalls, kind of like those things, but the opposite ones: not having governance, not understanding IAM's role and value in the entire cybersecurity landscape. And then the next two things are really about thinking of IAM as a technology project. That is a major issue that we see many times. IAM is simply seen as a technical tool. And the problem is that simply implementing a tool will not solve anything if you don't know what you're implementing and what policies and processes that you're deploying. So a technical tool simply won't do this. You have to have the governance and required policies in place. And then the last part, lack of persistence. So what that means is that you only sort of do this once. You know, you do the requirement gathering, policy definitions, you deploy them, but then you don't follow up. You don't make sure that they are actually followed, and then you don't have a roadmap or a plan to regularly review the requirements so that you know whether a change has to be made in the environment. So very important to have that in place. And with that, Peter, any final words? Do we have any questions online? I don't think we do. At least I can't see any.
Yeah, we do have quite a lot of questions.
Oh, okay. I don't see them, so apologies. All right, good.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your attention. And now we will try to answer a few questions. I don't know how much time do we have left.
Yes, I was at the wrong window.
Oh, okay. So we have a couple of minutes left on the seminar, so I'll try to answer as many as we can. So first we have a question that says, what's the main difference between NIS2 and CRA Act, and NIS2 and ISO 27K? Well, I'll suppose I'll try to answer that one. First of all, NIS2 is a general security sort of, I wouldn't say control set, but legislation that enables you to or give you sort of a bottom level of security that you need to have in your company. The CRA Act is for product developing companies. So basically, if you have a product that's connected to the network, the CRA requires you to keep it safe during its lifetime and regulates that quite heavily. So the CRA Act is a complement to NIS2 for product developing companies. Then the relationship between NIS2 and ISO 27K. Well, the way I see it, when I read the NIS2 proposal once upon a time for a couple of years ago, I realized that if you have an ISO 27000 certification already, the implementation of NIS2 will be quite simple, because many of the components that NIS2 mandates also are present in ISO 27000, like risk management, for example, and crisis management and business continuity management, and those things that are crucial and important. So having an ISO 27000 certification or working according to ISO 27000 is a good thing. You will be better prepared already. Okay, so let's see. I have another question here. NIS2, whether it belongs to IT security or OT security or both. Well, I can try to answer that one too. Then I'll give one to you, Kari. NIS2 is a general piece of legislation for information security, and I would say it's relevant to both sides, both IT and OT security. So you need to keep track of your information, regardless of what kind of environment the information is handled or it comes from. You need to keep track of it, and I would say that it's both. Okay, so
there's a question there about relating to PAM, or the credential and session management. So why is credential and session management considered to be relevant with respect to PAM only? Aren't they relevant with respect to all of IAM? Okay, so here we really need to go into a little bit more detail about the actual technical capabilities of PAM solutions and IAM. So what we mean here by session management is that instead of an administrator launching, for example, an RDP session directly to the endpoint in order to do their work, they actually do a browser-based logging into PAM solution first, and then launch the session from PAM into the endpoint with the administrative credentials that they don't even really are aware of. So they don't know the password of the admin credentials at all. So effectively, PAM acts as a proxy for sessions, which then enables PAM to do key logging and session recording and so on. So this is simply something that IGA or CM tools don't do. It's not in the capability set because it is very strictly and quite deliberately a PAM capability. Similarly, the credential management, when we are talking about scheduled or triggered password rotation. So again, taking the session example. So let's say that an administrator starts an RDP session from PAM to an endpoint. They do whatever they need to do with administrative credentials in that session context. When they log out of that session, then you can have a policy in place where PAM actually rotates that credential password. So the passwords are constantly rotated, which then obviously reduces your attack surface. And like I said in the presentation, that pretty much kills brute force attacks totally. So that's why these two capabilities are something that PAM tools do, but IGA and CM tools do not do at all, really. There is starting to be a little bit of an overlap from the vendors, that the same vendors are now offering IGA and PAM, but as logical capabilities, they are still in the two different sub areas of IAM. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, you want to take another one, Kari?
I'm trying to find one. Can you spot like an IAM related? There's how do you apply?
Well, while you look, I can take another one.
Yeah,
so
take another. Yeah.
We have one saying that, how does NIS2 relate to product cybersecurity? Resilience of products against cybersecurity threat. Is there any framework for managing the interface between these two? Well, as I said before, you have two separate pieces of legislation. One NIS2 that is general, and then you have the CRA, Cyber Resilience Act, which is directly aimed at product developing companies. And when it comes to CRA, its foundation is built on the same sort of basic rules or basic controls as NIS2 is, but it also adds lifecycle management and a number of other things that is product related. So I would rather look at the CRA legislation than look at NIS2 in this case. So did you find any, Kari?
There was one here about how do you map. Unfortunately, I can't answer this question, but I'll read it anyway. There's a question here about how do you map the IAM pillar based on Article 21, cybersecurity risk management, and because you mentioned governance also with Article 20. I don't know, Peter, if you can help me out here, because I'm not familiar with Articles 20 and 21, so unfortunately,
okay,
I cannot comment on this.
No, I'm sorry, but no. But okay. I can take that back to our legal persons, and they can help us answer it. So I want to iterate that we will answer all these questions and provide you all with the answers. But we need for some of these questions, which are really competent and complicated, we need to consult some colleagues.
We need to do some background work.
Yeah. Okay. So let us take another one. We had a couple of questions about reporting here, and I think I'll start like this. So basically, the reporting part here is something that's subject to local legislation. And this is due to the fact that there's not the same authority in each country that will be handling these kind of questions. And so far we've seen Finland and Sweden, and these two countries have different authorities, and they didn't decide yet, at least not in Sweden, whether what kind of information you have to provide. And as far as I know, there's nothing detailed about that in the directive either. So we are constantly monitoring legislation process in the countries where we are active, and trying to help our customers with understanding what is happening. And this is one thing that we are monitoring, of course, and will be communicating as soon as we get the information ourselves. But as I said, it's subject to local legislation, and will be communicated more thoroughly further on. Also, there was some question about if NIS2 was in effect already, and it's not. 17th of October is the date when legislation are to be in effect in all member countries. Not that much time for that. We have a question: does NIS2 affect all companies of all sizes? Is it already effective? I think the second part there I already answered. So 17th of October this year. And no, it doesn't affect all companies. It's a little bit all companies sizes, but it's a little bit complicated. You have two levels and of criticality within the companies and authorities, and the most critical ones have no lower limit for number of employees or other kinds of parameters. The lower part, where you're not very an important entity but not essential, that have a lower floor, I think, of some 50 employees. But this is also a matter for local legislation. So this is something that can be different between different countries. And then you also have another parameter here, and that is the CER Act, which is connected to NIS2. CER is for the essential companies, and that's legislation where the government can say that you are essential for us, and if you are a one-man company, a one-person company, you can still be essential for some kind of function in the government and critical to society. And this means that even one-person companies can be mandated to have NIS2 and CER, which is a really hard thing for a one-person company to do. So we'll see about that, how it works. Okay, I think we have another question about IGA.
There's one here which sort of relates to CM. The question is: the supply chain gets a lot of questionnaire from owners of critical industries. What typical evidence must the supply chain show to convince owners of critical industry of their compliance? That's a really, really good and interesting question. What I can say to that is that typically the problem from an IAM point of view, when it comes to the management of external identities and supplier organization identities, is the fact that you don't have access to the master data for identities, meaning basically the HR information of that external company. So you can't. I don't think so. I don't think I've seen any cases where there has been integration between two companies from one company's IAM into other companies' HR. That's just not allowed. People won't let you do that. So it is this lack of access to master data which creates this problem that, well, how do you know that some customer or supplier identity is still relevant? Are they still working for that company? Meaning that if they have left, then you need to disable all accounts, remove all access rights, and so on and so on. And of course, in today's sort of cloud environments, this is particularly challenging because you can't rely on kind of like network level restrictions on connectivity because you're talking about cloud services. So you can tackle that at least in a way that build a CM solution where you can actually delegate the management of those identities into the supplier organization. So effectively, they would have key users or administrators who are responsible for making sure that all of those identities are up to date. Of course, this does not 100% ensure that that actually happens. So then you need to have probably some contractual statements in place where this responsibility is clearly stated, and it's also regularly reviewed. But that would be like my comment to that. I don't know, Peter, if you have anything to add to that regarding the evidence part. That how does a supply chain offer evidence of their compliance?
Yeah, when it comes to that, I would say that I'm foreseeing something similar to to what's present in GDPR at the moment with the data processing agreements that you have with your subcontractors and customers. There will be something similar here, where companies put requirements on their supply chain to make sure that they are up to code and up to standard. They will be more complicated and so on, but than the GDPR rules, but I'm foreseeing that something like that needs to be in place. Thank you all. I think we're actually out of time. So
we are, yeah.
I thank you all for participating, and as I said, we're going to answer all the questions that came in, and we'll start doing that right after the meeting is closed. So thank you so much for your participation. Really appreciate having the opportunity to speak to you, and I hope we added value to your day. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.